You ever have one of those neighbors who thinks the world revolves around them? Well, mine was the HOA president, Karen herself. And last month she did something so bold, so illegal, and so unbelievably stupid that even the police who responded couldn't stop laughing. See, there's a small side path between my property and hers. It's my land, my deed, my boundary line, and all I did was put a simple chain with a padlock to stop her guests from using it as a shortcut. But Karen. Oh no, Karen doesn't believe private property applies to her. So one morning I walked outside and found my chain cut clean in half, lying on the ground. She stood there with giant garden shears, smirking like she just won some battle she invented. But she had no idea that cutting that chain was about to be the biggest mistake she ever made. Because that night I replaced it, not with a normal chain, not with a heavy-duty chain, but with a solid industrial steel chain, thick enough to tow a truck, wrapped around the gate, and I locked it tight. What happened next? Well, let's just say Karen woke up the next morning locked inside her own yard, screaming while her guests tried to climb the fence and the police showed up asking why she was trapped. And when they found out why, let's just say she wasn't laughing anymore. Before I continue, would you have done the same? Or gone even further? Comment below. And if you love crazy HOA stories like this, hit that subscribe button so you never miss another one. I never thought a single rusty chain could start a full-blown neighborhood scandal. But when you live next to an HOA president who wakes up every morning thinking she's the sheriff, judge, and queen of the subdivision, that chain became my last line of defense. It all started with the shortcut. On the left side of my property, there's a narrow gravel path that technically belongs to me, surveyed, confirmed, legally written right there on my deed. It leads around the back of my yard and connects to my workshop garage. Nothing special, nothing fancy. But somehow every party, every book club meeting, every pool gathering Karen hosted her guests, and sometimes Karen herself would walk straight through it like it was a public hiking trail. I ignored it at first. You pick your battles. But everything changed the day I found a stranger standing in my backyard near my tools, trying to find the exit. That was the last straw, so I put up a simple gate. Nothing dramatic, just a wooden frame with a basic chain and lock. It wasn't even meant to keep people out forever. Just enough to force Karen's guests and Karen herself to walk around like everyone else. But of course, Karen saw it as an act of war. The next morning, as I'm sipping coffee on my porch, I hear clang, clink, snap. I turn my head and there she is, Karen, pastel blazer, ugly sun hat, arms shaking with effort as she holds a pair of giant garden loppers shaped like they were stolen from a tree-cutting crew. She wasn't even being subtle about it. She stared straight at me while cutting through the chain. It snapped clean, fell to the ground, and she gave me that smug, I run this neighborhood smile. Problem solved, she chirped. You can't block an HOA pathway, I blinked. This isn't an HOA pathway, it's on my deed. Do you want to see the property line? Karen waved her hand like she was shooing away a mesquite. I don't need to see anything, the board already agreed, it's a community easement now. Since when? Since I decided it was. Audience, pause here. Have you ever met someone so confident and wrong at the same time? Tell me in the comments because I swear Karen is a different species. Anyway, back to the moment. I walked toward the gate and picked up my broken chain. She actually looked proud of herself, like she just liberated France. You know, I told her, destroying my property is illegal. She rolled her eyes so hard I think she almost sprained them. Oh, please, you can't illegally block residents from walking. I'll do it again if I have to. Then she left, marching down the path she just claimed, like a dictator doing a parade march. That night I sat in my workshop staring at the broken chain. Most people would call the police. Most people would file a report. Most people would stop right there. But I'm not most people. Because a Karen only understands consequences when she feels them. And tonight she was going to learn something important about property boundaries the hard way. I drove to the hardware supply yard right outside town. You know the kind, industrial, dusty, with forklifts moving giant metal coils. The guy at the counter raised an eyebrow when I asked for something strong enough to lock down a gate even if someone uses bolt cutters. He disappeared and came back pushing a cart with a chain that looked like it could tow a tractor trailer. Inch-thick steel links, dark, heavy, solid. My arms strained just lifting it. You planning to stop a tank? He joked. Something worse, I muttered. An HOA president. He just nodded like he'd heard this kind of thing before. When I got home, it was already close to midnight. The neighborhood was quiet except for Karen's porch lights, which were on as usual, probably to catch someone violating her imaginary rules. I waited until her lights turned off. Then I got to work. The steel chain wrapped around the gate like it was hugging it. I threaded it through the posts twice, added a hardened padlock rated anti-tamper, and double-checked the fit. There was no way, no earthly way, someone armed with garden loppers could break through it. And when I stepped back looking at this industrial monster of a chain gleaming under the moonlight, I felt an unexpected sense of satisfaction. Not petty revenge, not spite, just justice. Because this wasn't about a chain anymore. It was about boundaries, my boundaries, something Karen had stomped across for years like she owned the whole zip code. The next morning, I was inside making breakfast when I heard the scream. Not a normal scream. What in the name of the HOA bylaws is this? Kind of scream. I stepped outside to see Karen standing at the gate wearing pajamas, slippers, and the angriest expression a human face can physically produce. She was tugging the chain like she was in an Olympic tug-of-war contest. "What is this?" she shrieked, rattling it so hard the fence shook. "It's a chain," I said calmly. "Remember, you broke the old one. This is illegal. You can't lock me in my own yard. You walked into my side of the property," I reminded her. "So yes, technically you're in your own yard, but the path behind the gate is still mine, and I locked it." She screamed again, this high-pitched sound like a kettle boiling over. "Unlock it now, I have guests coming." "Oh, they'll figure it out," I said. "They can use the sidewalk like normal people." Her face turned red enough to match a fire hydrant. She whipped out her phone. "I'm calling the police." I raised an eyebrow. "Great, let's all talk about who cut whose property." And she froze. Because she realized something. She hadn't thought through what she did yesterday. And the moment she understood that this situation might actually get her in trouble, not me, her confidence started to crack. But it was too late. Her guests were already walking over, staring at her trapped behind the steel chain like she was a zoo exhibit. And someone whispered, "Is she locked inside her yard?" Karen shrieked. "No, he did this," pointing at me like she was accusing me of arson. The spectacle had begun. Trust me, it was only the beginning. Karen's guest stood on the sidewalk staring at her like she was a wild animal pacing behind a zoo barrier. The industrial steel chain rattled loud every time she yanked it, adding this metallic tension to the air that somehow made it even funnier. But to Karen, this wasn't funny. This was the end of civilization. She was pacing back and forth inside her yard, still in her fuzzy slippers, clutching her phone like it was a detonator. "You are in big trouble." She snapped at me. "I am calling the police and you are going to jail, jail." "Great," I said. "Tell them to bring the paperwork for property destruction." Karen blinked. "What paperwork?" "The one where you cut my chain yesterday." Her jaw dropped so far I thought it might hit the railing. I did not, I never, you can't prove anything," I laughed. "Oh, I can prove everything. Check your HOA cameras. You know, the ones you installed that somehow all face everyone else's property. I'm sure they caught you walking over with giant shears." Her eyes widened. She had completely forgotten about her own cameras. Audience, what do you think she did next? A, double down on the lie. B, try to escape. C, blame the neighbors. Drop your guess in the comments because I swear this woman unlocked Karen level 100. She chose all three. First, she doubled down. "I didn't cut anything. Those cameras were malfunctioning anyway." Then she tried to escape. She actually grabbed a patio chair and attempted to climb over the fence. I yelled, "Careful, it's a 6-foot drop on the other side." She froze mid-climb, realizing I was right, then screamed at me again. Then she blamed the neighbors. "This is all Greg's fault. He must have convinced you to do this. He has always been jealous of my leadership." Her guests whispered awkwardly. One of them muttered, "Leadership. She's president of like 50 houses." Karen whipped around. I heard that. Just when it couldn't get any more ridiculous, the faint sound of sirens echoed down the street. Karen immediately straightened her pajama shirt like she was about to accept an award. "Oh, good," she said confidently. "Now you're done." Two police officers stepped out of the cruiser. One looked young and tired, the other older and deeply familiar with HOA drama. You could tell by his expression that he already regretted every life choice that led him to this moment. Officer Ramirez, the older one, asked, "Okay, what's the emergency?" Karen pointed at me like she was conducting an orchestra. "He imprisoned me." The officers looked at her, then at the chain, then at me. Officer Ramirez sighed. "You're imprisoned in your own yard." "Yes," she yelled. "He locked me in against my will." I folded my arms. "She cut my original chain yesterday, destroyed my property, so I replaced it." Officer Ramirez turned to her. "You cut his chain." "No," Karen shrieked. "I never cut anything." The younger officer quietly pointed to the corner of her porch. "Ma'am, are those bolt cutters?" Karen turned. On her patio table, plain as day, were her giant garden loppers. She must have dropped them there in her panic earlier. She slowly tried to slide her hand over them to block the view, but officers see everything. Ramirez pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, did you cut his chain?" "That is irrelevant," she screamed. "He locked me up. He is holding me hostage." Officer Ramirez looked at her calmly. "You walked onto his property and cut his lock, so he replaced it on his side. You're not locked in. You can go through your house." Karen froze. She hadn't thought of that. The officers watched her face as realization spread like a slow computer loading screen. "You mean I can just go around?" "Yes, ma'am," the younger officer said gently. "Through your front door." Complete silence. Then Karen whispered, "Oh." The crowd of neighbors snorted. Someone laughed out loud. One woman actually covered her mouth to hide her smirk. Karen's face turned crimson. I still want him fined. He has to remove that," she yelled, pointing at the steel chain like it personally insulted her family. Officer Ramirez shook his head. "He's allowed to secure his property boundary. If you stepped onto his land to cut his chain, that's destruction of property." "I did not." Ramirez raised an eyebrow. Karen's voice cracked. "Okay, maybe I trimmed. Tiny bit, but so you did cut it." "No, I mean yes, but no, She was spiraling. I couldn't help it. I smiled. The older officer finally stopped her nonsense. "Ma'am, if you cut his chain again or step onto his property to do anything without permission, you will be charged. Do you understand?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a malfunctioning robot. Then she muttered something like "fine" and stormed back inside her house, slamming the door so hard a bird flew out of a nearby tree. The officers turned to me. "We're sorry for the situation," Ramirez said. "Just keep the peace." "I always do," I replied. But as they drove off, I saw Karen peeking at me from behind her blinds, eyes narrowed, plotting something. And I knew one thing for sure, this fight wasn't over. It had barely begun. For the next 2 days, everything seemed quiet, too quiet. Karen wasn't yelling at passing cars. She wasn't patrolling the neighborhood with her clipboard like a predator hunting violations. She wasn't sending passive-aggressive HOA emails with subject lines like, "Friendly reminder, respect rules you didn't agree to." Instead, her house was eerily still. And if you know Karen's stillness is more dangerous than screaming. Around day 3, I noticed something strange. At exactly 6 a.m., Karen slipped out her front door wearing all black, black hoodie, black leggings, black sneakers, like she thought she was in a spy movie. And she crouched down, tiptoeing toward the side path. "Oh boy," I whispered, "here we go." I quietly stepped into my workshop and grabbed the little surprise I installed after the chain-cutting incident, a motion-activated camera mounted right above the gate, angled perfectly. When I returned to the back patio, Karen was already at the gate tugging on the industrial chain. Of course it didn't move. It probably weighed more than she did. She pulled out a screwdriver, then pliers, then some old wire cutters. Nothing worked. She looked around and whispered to herself, "Come on, come on." Then she did something that made me snort so hard I had to cover my mouth. She tried using cooking scissors, not even good ones. The cheap kind. They didn't even scratch the metal. Growled in frustration, hair falling out of her bun, face turning red. Then she took out her phone and started recording herself. "Yes," she whispered dramatically like she was filming a documentary. "This is evidence. This is illegal." He locked an active community pathway, and mid-rant, she grabbed the chain with both hands and yanked it violently. And because the chain didn't move, she fell backward and landed flat on her back. I swear it made the exact sound of a pancake hitting a griddle. I walked out from behind the fence. "You all right there? Mission impossible." Karen gasped and jumped to her feet like she'd been electrocuted. I was just examining the illegal structure." "That's funny," I said, "because to me it looked like attempted vandalism." Her eyes widened. "You have no proof." I smirked and pointed up. The camera light blinked red. Karen looked like she was about to melt into the ground. "That's THATS illegal," she shouted. "You can't film me. You were on my property line." "Well, your property line is wrong." "Oh, really? Let's check the county geese again." Karen froze. She knew she'd lose that argument instantly, but she tried a new tactic, the pity voice. She put her hand on her chest dramatically. "I'm just trying to protect the community. They need this path. It's tradition." "Karen," I said calmly, "you've lived here 8 years. That's long enough for a tradition." Audience, have you ever witnessed someone try to invent a community tradition out of thin air just to justify trespassing? Comment below because this woman was unhinged. Karen shifted tactics again. "This chain is dangerous," she said. "Someone could get hurt." "Not if they stay off my property," she fumed. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" I shrugged. "Clever enough to install a camera before you tried Spy Kids 3 on my chain." Her face twisted. "This isn't over," she hissed. "The HOA will hear about this." She stormed away, limping slightly from her fall, muttering under her breath about violations and disrespectful homeowners and chains belonging in medieval castles. But I wasn't worried about the HOA hearing about it, because I already knew something she didn't. I had captured her entire failed sabotage attempt on video. And I had no idea yet, but that video was going to blow this situation wide open. What happened next? Let's just say the HOA meeting that week became the most chaotic, dramatic, unbelievable showdown in neighborhood history, with Karen at the center of it all. The HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. on Thursday. Normally, these meetings were boring. Half the neighbors stayed home, a few retirees showed up for the free cookies, and Karen used the time to flex her imaginary authority like a dictator doing a PowerPoint presentation. But not this time. Oh no, this time word had spread. "Did you hear Karen got locked in her own yard? Someone said she fell trying to cut a chain." Apparently the police told her she was wrong. By 6:45 p.m. the meeting room was packed. Neighbors leaned against walls, whispering. Even people who never attended HOA meetings showed up like it was a pay-per-view event. And there she was. Karen sat at the front table with her clipboard and her little name tag that said HOA President. She tapped her pen rapidly, the only sign she was nervous. Her eyes darted toward me every few seconds like I was a bomb waiting to explode. Her son, Kyle, 20 years old, permanently unemployed, full-time troublemaker, sat beside her scrolling his phone, probably looking for TikToks about HOA revenge. At exactly 7 p.m., Karen stood. "Hello, everyone," she said in a rehearsed, fake-friendly voice. "We have important business tonight. Item number 1, trespassing and illegal encroachment by a homeowner." Murmurs rippled through the room. I raised my hand. "Is the homeowner me by chance?" Karen ignored me dramatically. "One resident," she continued, "has installed an unauthorized blockade on what has functionally become a community pathway. This blockade is dangerous, hostile, and violates the spirit of neighborhood cooperation." I laughed out loud. "You mean my gate, on my property, after you cut my chain?" Several neighbors snickered. Karen slammed her hand down. "Order!" Nobody listened. I pulled out my phone, tapped the little video file, and held it up to the crowd. "Actually," I said calmly, "before we go any further, I think everyone should see this." The TV in the meeting room had an HDMI cable. I plugged my phone in. Karen realized what was happening and nearly screamed, "No, that is not ALLOWED." But it was too late. The video began playing. Karen, full spy mode, dressed in all black, creeping up to the gate, tugging it, pulling out random tools, trying to cut it with kitchen scissors, then violently yanking the chain and falling flat on her back. The room exploded. People burst into laughter. Some covered their faces. One old man wheezed and whispered, "Oh Lord, she really did the stunt work herself." Karen stood frozen, jaw trembling, eyes wide, her face turning purple. "That video," she hissed, "is illegal." "No," I said, "you were on the property line and the camera faces my land. Also, you don't get to complain about cameras when you installed 6 pointing at other people's yards." Someone yelled, "Yeah, and she zooms them in." Another neighbor chimed in, "She wrote me up because my dog sat on the wrong part of the lawn." Karen spun toward the crowd. "This is an attack on me," a woman near the back yelled, "because you attack everyone else." The room erupted in cheering. Karen slammed her clipboard down again. "This meeting is out of control. You can't PUT chains on community land." "It's not community land," I said, pulling out a printed copy of my deed. "Here's the county map with parcel boundaries. The entire path is mine." I handed it to the nearest board member. They studied it, then looked at me, then looked at Karen, and finally said the words everyone else was thinking. "Karen, he's right." Silence. Then a neighbor muttered, "This is embarrassing." Another whispered, "She's losing it." Karen's eyes went wild. "This is a conspiracy," she yelled. "He forged documents, he hacked maps, he's a threat to the community." I raised an eyebrow. "I locked my own gate, you cut it twice." "She didn't cut it twice," someone whispered. I smirked. "Give it time." The room laughed again. Karen shook, fists balled like she wanted to explode into glitter and rage. Then she grabbed her clipboard and screamed, "This meeting is canceled," and stormed out furious, humiliated, defeated, but not done. Because I saw her son Kyle whisper something to her as they left. They were planning something stupid, something big, something that would drag the police and the entire HOA board back into the mess. And part 5, that's when everything ignited. If you've ever dealt with a Karen before, you know this universal truth. When a Karen is embarrassed publicly, she doesn't retreat. She reloads. 2 days after the meeting, around 11:30 p.m., I heard footsteps outside near the side path. Slow, heavy footsteps, not Karen's. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped quietly to the back door. Then I heard whispering, a male voice. Cocky, smug, Kyle, Karen's son. "Bro, it's just a chain," he whispered to someone else. "We cut it, move it, and Mom wins." Great, Kyle brought backup and bolt cutters. I turned on the patio light and stepped outside. "Working late tonight?" I called. Kyle jumped. Oh, we're just checking something." "Yeah," the other guy said nervously. "Karen said this chain is like illegal or something." I smirked. "Funny how she keeps saying that, yet the cops keep telling her the opposite." Kyle lifted the bolt cutters. "Well, we're cutting it back off." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "The camera's already recording." The guy with him froze instantly. Kyle hesitated, then sneered. "You can't stop me, Mom's the HOA president." I nodded. "Yeah, and last time the cops came, they reminded her that trespassing is a crime." Kyle scoffed. "Whatever, dude, no one's calling the cops." I pulled out my phone. "I am." He lunged forward and yelled, "Don't you dare." The other guy grabbed his arm. "Dude, stop, this is stupid." Kyle yanked free and charged at the gate like he was auditioning for a demolition derby. The chain rattled. The gate didn't move an inch. Kyle stumbled backward, almost falling like his mother did. I hit call. 911, what's your emergency? "Yes," I said loud enough for Kyle to hear. "I have someone trespassing and attempting to vandalize my property. Again." Kyle's eyes widened. You did not just. Blue and red lights flashed around the corner before he could finish. The police were already patrolling nearby. The cruiser rolled up fast, sirens short blipping. Two officers stepped out. Another familiar face, Officer Ramirez. He took one look at Kyle holding bolt cutters and sighed deeply like life was slowly draining his soul. Kyle, he said, tell me you're not about to cut that chain. Kyle stammered, I was just fixing it. Ramirez pointed at the bolt cutters. With those, Kyle shoved them behind his back. These are for weeds. Even his friend facepalmed. Ramirez walked to the gate, inspected the chain, the tools, the camera, and Kyle's guilty posture. Then he turned to me. You want to press charges? Before I could answer, Karen came running out of her house wearing slippers and screaming, Stop! Kyle did nothing wrong. Ramirez pinched the bridge of his nose again. Oh boy, here we go. Karen ran to the gate, waving her arms like she was signaling a plane. Officer, it's his fault. He locked the gate and trapped my son. Kyle whispered, Mom, stop. She didn't, she kept going. He is undermining the HOA, he is sabotaging the community, he is inciting a rebellion. Ramirez stared at her blankly. Ma'am, your son is trespassing with tools at midnight. Karen gasped dramatically. As president of the HOA, I grant us permission. HOA authority doesn't override private property laws, Ramirez said, exhausted. Karen froze again. It was becoming a pattern. Ma'am, Ramirez continued, if your son cuts that chain or touches this gate again, he will be arrested. This isn't a negotiation. Kyle gulped. His friend backed away slowly like he wanted no part of this. Karen, however, was done with logic. She yelled, This is harassment. Ramirez calmly replied, Then stop harassing your neighbor. Karen's jaw dropped. The neighbors who had gathered by now started whispering again. She's losing it. This is crazy. She needs to stop. Karen turned around, hearing all of it, and screamed, Fine, if the law won't help me, the HOA will. And she stormed back inside, dragging Kyle with her like a toddler. The police left soon after, but not before Ramirez said quietly to me, Record everything, she's spiraling. And he was right, because the next morning I received an official HOA violation letter accusing me of illegally imprisoning the HOA president and her son. It was signed by Karen herself. And that violation, it would start the final war. The next morning, I opened my mailbox expecting bills, maybe a coupon, maybe the newspaper. Instead, a bright yellow HOA violation letter practically glowing like radioactive waste. I tore it open. Notice of serious community violation, illegal imprisonment of HOA president and family. I actually laughed, out loud, in my driveway. The letter continued. Your unauthorized metal blockade trapped the HOA president and her son, creating a safety hazard and hostile environment. You are ordered to remove the chain immediately and attend a mandatory HOA investigation. It ended with, failure to comply will result in escalating fines. Signed, HOA President Karen. Audience, I'm not kidding. This woman actually tried to charge me with imprisoning her in her own yard. Even after the police told her I was fully in the right. But I wasn't angry. I was excited because this wasn't a violation letter, it was bait. And Karen had finally given me everything I needed to finish this. I walked straight to the HOA office building, which was really just a repurposed garage with bad lighting and a folding table where the investigation was happening. Inside were the other 3 board members. They looked exhausted. Dark circles under their eyes, papers everywhere. They weren't dealing with an HOA issue. They were dealing with a Karen issue. Karen sat at the front, chin raised high like she was awaiting her coronation. Ah, good, she said coldly. You're here. The board will now hear my formal complaint. One board member, Linda, whispered, We've heard it twice. Karen ignored her. She slammed a binder onto the table. A massive, overstuffed binder labeled, Chain Incident Evidence. Inside were blurry screenshots, printed emails to herself, badly drawn diagrams, and a list titled, Reasons the Chain Must Be Removed, 46 pages. I took a deep breath. Before we continue, I said calmly, I'd like to submit my own evidence. Karen smirked. You have none. Oh, really? I connected my phone to the screen on the wall. The video played, Kyle and his friend at midnight, bolt cutters, whispering, trespassing, attempting to cut the chain, the arrival of the police. Karen running out screaming at officers, her claiming she has HOA authority over the law. Every second was recorded. Every word was clear. The board just stared at the screen in horror. Linda closed her eyes slowly. Oh my God, the treasurer whispered. She invoked emergency HOA authority over the police, the vice president muttered. She was bad, but this, Karen leapt from her chair like a launched firework. This is doctored, she screamed. This is fake, UPHOTUSHOPPED it, the treasurer sighed. Karen, it's a video. I don't care, he is a manipulator, a rule breaker, a community threat. I stepped forward. Actually, I brought something else. I handed them a printed copy of the county parcel map with my property highlighted. The vice president leaned in. Yeah. This gate is completely on his land. Karen yelled, the map is wrong. Linda replied dryly, it's from the county. Well, the county is wrong. The board member stared at her like she had just barked. I continued, and I'd like to remind everyone that she cut my chain first with her own tools, which she then left out when the police arrived. Linda nodded slowly. Yes, the officer told us that. Karen shrieked, he is lying, they are all lying. It was over for her, she just didn't know it yet. The board stepped aside for a moment. Karen paced in circles, muttering, I will win, I always win, these sheep don't understand leadership. Then the board returned. Linda cleared her throat. Karen, due to the evidence presented, the police reports, and the multiple complaints filed by residents, the board is issuing a formal reprimand. Karen froze. A reprimand? A reprimand? I am the president. Linda continued calmly, and we are voting now on removing you from that position. Karen gasped so loudly I thought she might pass out. You can't remove me. We can, the treasurer said, and we vote unanimously to do so. Karen let out an inhuman noise like a teapot exploding and threw her clipboard across the room, papers flying like confetti. This is a coup, a mutiny, treason, Linda answered. Please leave the meeting, Karen. No, I am the HOA. No, Linda said softly, you were the HOA. Karen stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows vibrated. The board turned back to me. We're so sorry, Linda said. We didn't know how bad it had gotten. Oh, you'll see, I replied, because this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of her meltdown, and the next 48 hours, they were pure chaos. When someone like Karen loses power, they don't accept it. They attack, they lash out, they unravel. By sunset that evening, neighbors noticed something strange. Karen had posted dozens of homemade signs around the neighborhood, handwritten, red marker, all caps. Do not trust the HOA, they are corrupt. The chain man is a liar and a menace. I am the true HOA president, ignore the coup, one sign said. The steel chain is a weapon of war. Another, I will take back control tomorrow. Audience, what would you do at this point? Call the cops, make popcorn, because I chose popcorn. The neighborhood was buzzing, people gathered in small groups whispering. She finally snapped. Those signs are nuts. She's going to get herself arrested. I heard she's planning something tonight, and oh yes, she was. At 2:13 a.m., I woke to flashing lights outside, not police lights, flashlights. I stepped out quietly. 3 figures stood at the side path. Karen, Kyle, and Kyle's friend, all in black again, all wearing gloves, all holding something. Kyle had bolt cutters. The friend had a hammer. Karen held a crowbar. I stepped forward slowly. You seriously came back? Karen spun toward me, eyes wild. This is our community path, she screamed. And we are taking it back, Kyle shouted. Yeah, though he clearly wanted to be anywhere else. Karen pointed the crowbar at the chain. Break it, Kyle hesitated. Mom will get arrested. No, we won't, she snapped. I am still the president. No, you're not, I said. Yes, I am. I declare myself president permanently. That's not how anything works. It is if I say it is. She raised the crowbar in a dramatic swing, and right at that moment, headlights flooded the yard, police cruiser, second cruiser, both pulling up fast. Kyle dropped the bolt cutters instantly. The friend whispered, I told you this was dumb, but Karen, she spun toward the police like a warrior running into battle. Officers, she yelled. Arrest HIM, he is endangering the community. Officer Ramirez stepped out of the cruiser and said calmly, Ma'am, step away from the chain. No, she screamed, gripping the crowbar. This is MY land, it's not. I am the president. No, you're not. I am the HOA. Ma'am, put the crowbar down. She held it tighter. Kyle whispered, Mom, please stop. Ramirez took a step forward. Karen, listen carefully. You are trespassing. You are attempting vandalism with a weapon, and you are violating a police order. This ends now. Karen trembled. Red-faced, sweating, shaking. I just want MY control back. Ramirez shook his head. That's not how neighborhoods work. Karen looked around at me, at the officers, at her terrified son, at the cameras, at the neighbors peeking from windows. And then she broke. She dropped the crowbar, fell to her knees, and screamed. Not a normal scream, a rage-filled, defeated, guttural sound that echoed through the entire street. Kyle stepped back slowly. The friend ran. The police moved in calmly. Karen pushed their hands away but didn't fight. She just cried. He took everything from me. He ruined MY authority. He destroyed MY power. I said softly. You destroyed it yourself. She glared at me with pure hatred. You started all this with that chain, Ramirez shook his head. No, Karen, you started all this when you cut it. And that was the moment Karen realized she was done. Karen wasn't arrested that night, but she was detained. The officers put her in the back of the cruiser not because she fought, but because she wouldn't stop screaming. Her meltdown echoed through the street like a siren. Kyle stood there on the edge of the lawn, hands in his hair, pacing in circles. Mom, why do you always do this? He muttered. For once, I actually felt a little bad for him. Officer Ramirez turned to me as they finished securing the scene. "Look," he said, "I'm documenting everything. The trespassing, the attempted vandalism, the threat with a crowbar, the property disputes. The HOA board also filed a formal complaint against her after she confronted them earlier tonight." "Confronted how?" I asked. Ramirez sighed. "She tried to force them to reinstate her, barged into the treasurer's house, claimed she still had divine HOA authority." I blinked. "Divine?" "Yes, divine." I had no words. Then he added, "The board is holding an emergency vote tomorrow to determine what happens next." Karen's shouts from the cruiser were still going, muffled but loud. "The community needs MEEE. I am the HOA. I am order. I am structure." Kyle winced. "Can you shut her window or something?" The younger officer muttered. "Windows are shut." I tried not to laugh. Ramirez finally guided Kyle away. "You and your mother need to step back from this. She's crossed too many lines." Kyle rubbed his face. "This is all over a chain." "No," I said. "This is all over her not respecting boundaries." Kyle didn't answer. He just walked back inside their house, head down. As the police cars rolled away, neighbors came outside, clustering in little groups, whispering, some recording, some shaking their heads. Across the street, Mrs. Vaughn whispered to her husband, "Well, we always knew she'd snap one day." Another neighbor replied, "She threatened to fine me last year because my bush looked too confident." The crowd chuckled. Someone else said, "What happens now?" I shrugged. "Board votes tomorrow." But deep inside, I knew this wasn't just about a vote. This was about the neighborhood reclaiming itself. The next morning, the HOA board didn't meet in the garage. They met at the community center because so many people showed up the little garage wouldn't hold them. You could feel the tension even in the parking lot. Everyone already knew what was at stake. Inside, the board sat on a raised platform. Linda, acting president, Marcus, treasurer, Cynthia, vice president, Greg, secretary, Karen, unbelievably, showed up, hair messy, eyes red, clipboard in hand like it was a weapon. Her son trailed behind her, embarrassed. Linda stood. "We're here today to finalize the matter of Karen's status in the HOA based on repeated misconduct." Karen interrupted immediately. "You have no right." Linda didn't even flinch. "Karen, you threatened the board, you trespassed repeatedly, you caused police intervention, you misused rules to target one homeowner, and last night you attempted to break into someone's property with a crowbar." "It was symbolic," Karen screeched. "A symbol of my leadership," Marcus muttered. "It looked more like a symbol of a felony." The room snorted with laughter. Karen spun toward me. "This is your fault. You manipulated everyone. You turned them against me." I shrugged. "All I did was lock my gate." "It was a community path." "It was." Kyle whispered, "Mom, stop." She ignored him. Linda held up a document. "We have the police reports, the video evidence, and the testimonies from residents." Karen shrieked, "They are all lying. I am the only one who cares." Linda paused. "Karen, caring doesn't mean controlling." The room hummed with agreement. "The board," Linda continued, "will now vote on removing Karen entirely from the HOA board and initiating an HOA-wide ban on her holding any HOA position for a minimum of 10 years. Karen gasped like she'd been shot. "No, please, you can't take this from me." Karen gripped her clipboard with white knuckles. "I am nothing without the HOA." Silence, because for the first time she told the truth. Linda gently said, "Karen, maybe that's the problem." The vote took less than 30 seconds. 4-0, unanimous. Karen is removed permanently. Karen screamed a long, dramatic wail, then bolted out of the meeting, knocking over 2 chairs and nearly tripping on the carpet. Kyle followed her quietly, face red with humiliation. The neighborhood let out a collective breath. It was over. But the final chapter had one last twist. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt normal, peaceful. No more daily patrols from Karen. No more HOA emails with subject lines like, "Your trash can" was emotionally offensive. No more fines for imaginary violations. People walked dogs without being stared down. Kids rode bikes without Karen taking notes. Life started to breathe again. As for the chain, still there, still steel, still uncut. And nobody had a problem with it because everyone now understood exactly why it was needed. But the story wasn't quite finished. 3 days after the vote, I was outside cleaning my workshop when I heard footsteps approaching. Slow, hesitant, I turned. It was Kyle, hands in pockets, eyes down, hair messy like he hadn't slept well. "Hey," he said quietly. I nodded. "Hey," he kicked some gravel. "Look, I'm sorry." I raised an eyebrow. "For what? There's a lot to pick from," he sighed. "All of it, Mom. She's not a bad person. She thinks rules make her important." After my dad left, the HOA was the only thing she felt she could control. I softened slightly. This wasn't the kid who swung bolt cutters. This was a son caught in the crossfire of his mother's obsession. He continued, "I don't blame you for any of this. Honestly, the neighborhood's been happier the last few days." I nodded slowly. "It's not your fault or your responsibility." Kyle looked relieved. "Thanks, and I found this." He handed me something, a key. to Karen's old HOA office filing cabinet. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. Kyle whispered, "Because you should know something." I waited. Kyle leaned in. "Karen wasn't just controlling people, she was hiding things." My stomach dropped a little. "Hiding what?" "Finances, letters, complaints, stuff she didn't want the board to see." He swallowed. "And the board, they want you to look first." "Me, why me?" Kyle explained. "Because you're the only one who wasn't scared of her." I stared at the key. This story wasn't about a chain anymore. It wasn't about a gate, or trespassing, or even Karen's meltdown. It was about something much deeper, what she was hiding all along. That night, I opened the filing cabinet in the old HOA office. Inside were dozens of folders marked. Complaints do not show board, unauthorized fines paid, pathway plan private, Karen's action list with 52 pages of future punishments, and one file in bold marker, Chain Man Strategy. I opened it. Inside were hand-drawn maps, plans to declare the pathway community property, attempts to find me, notes about mobilizing the board against him, and even a drafted letter to the county claiming I was dangerous. It was all there, months of planned harassment, false reports she never sent, notes about manipulating neighbors, proof clear as day. By the next morning, the entire board had seen it. They called an emergency meeting. They voted to void every fine she ever issued. They voted to reimburse homeowners she illegally charged. They even voted to request a restraining order preventing Karen from approaching any HOA property or its board members for 1 full year. And for the first time, Karen couldn't do anything. She had no position, no power, no authority, only consequences. 2 weeks later, I was sitting on my porch when I noticed Karen outside for the first time since the meltdown. She didn't scream at anyone. She didn't carry her clipboard. She didn't patrol. She just walked to her car quietly and drove away. No drama, no yelling, no glares, just silence, almost peaceful. The neighborhood slowly recovered. New HOA leadership, less drama, more community, and the steel chain still wrapped around my gate, not as a weapon, not as revenge, but as a reminder boundaries matter, respect matters. And when someone tries to take your property, your peace, or your rights, sometimes all it takes is a steel chain to stop them.